Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Automation Rocketship channel. We are back with another amazing episode on Solution Accelerators. And joining me here today are Andy Menon and Pradeep Shukla, our crew members who are going to be discussing on Solution Accelerators. Hello, guys.
Hey Priya, hey Andy, how
Hey,
are you guys doing?
good, good.
Great.
It's been a while since we got together. So I think Pradeep has got some interesting stuff to show us, and I'm curious. Guys. I'm the learner on this during the session. So I'm looking forward to Pradeep, showing some of his or kind of presenting some of his expertise on and his experience on Solution Accelerator. So Pradeep, over to you, my friend.
All right, so let's get started and talk about few solution accelerators. So it has been a very hot topic of late. I know there has been a lot of information around what solution accelerators are, how we can take advantage of them. So solution accelerators are part of marketplace, UiPath marketplace. If you see here, you'll find accelerators as a separate uh, title itself on the browser itself, right? So you can see there are over 60 solution accelerators are out here that have been published by UiPath. Now, we are not going to go through all of them, but the objective of this session would be to introduce solution accelerators and discuss what exactly Solution Accelerator is, right? What are the components as part of Solution Accelerator that we get, and how we can best use to develop solution, and what are the benefits we can get out of it. That being said, I would talk about primarily the first one over here, ITSM user provisioning. So let's look at it. So if we click this page here, just like any other component, right? Any other marketplace component, you'll see details regarding a summary, what particular this solution accelerator is, and UiPath puts a description with in terms of this is an automation framework with some built-in use cases. But again, these are not plug and play solution, right? So that's the primary thing. This is provided or shared with us primarily to provide a notional design of a solution, how a particular solution needs to be built, what different components should be part of it, and what areas of design we need to primarily focus on, how to design a solution for enterprise, right? Enterprise scale. So in this particular solution, if you look at the use case is pretty straightforward for any ITSM solution. So what ITSM is primarily, if folks are not aware of, so it's information technology service management. So in any organization, whenever any request comes in, it always managed through one of the ITSM platforms. And these are platform solutions like ServiceNow, SAP. Um, so just for example, let's say you join a new company and you need to be issued a laptop. So that is actually an ITSM ticket that needs to be created first in the system. And then obviously that ticket gets approved by your hiring manager. Then it goes to the IT team, and IT team from there picks up a laptop, boxes it, and ships it to you. Or if they have to procure a new laptop altogether, then they put a PO with the manufacturer or their supplier, and it's shipped to you through that route. So it provides a lot of back-end support, but interestingly, that is the backbone of any enterprise. You take it, right? Whether it's a retail, e-commerce, healthcare, or even IT companies. So in no matter where you go, ITSM is always going to be there. This particular solution accelerator talks about user provisioning, which is one of the examples of that is where you get issued a laptop, right? When your user account is created for that organization. So let's talk about a few other things, what this solution can provide. It can retrieve access requests from an ITSM application we talked about. routes approval flow for access requests, just like getting approved from the various approvers, performing update against a targeted system where your target system could be ServiceNow, SAP, Salesforce for that matter, and finally updating the status of that particular access request when that is completed. So we'll look at four different use cases, four different steps of a use case. We'll look at a high-level design, how the solution is modeled after, and obviously we'll talk about various documentation that comes as part of the solution accelerator. Okay, so let's see if I hope I didn't miss anything. So, and then down the line here, you can see all the dependencies, what programming language, what runtime you need for the solution accelerator to be implemented. All right. So now that we know a brief about Solution Accelerator and also about this particular use case, I would like to uh, hear some inputs from Priya or Andy, what conversation they had with the UiPath product managers regarding Solution Accelerators in the last MVP summit that they attended.
Yeah, thanks, Pradeep. That was a really good overview of what the ITSM user provisioning accelerator is. So, I mean, you gave a really nice introduction, walkthrough of all the different accelerators that are available. One thing that really they just put it very basic is that we spoke to Peter Cooks and Ravi, who are the product managers for the solution accelerators. And one thing that they basically put out was that these solution accelerators are just reusable components, but in a very generic framework. So that is easily customizable. So just like how you were showing for this ITSM user provisioning, there are several different systems that we could use, like ServiceNow, Jira, but they give you that basic, the use case that you can take and build over it that is easily customizable. And there were a couple of really nice updates that we're coming up with, because just like at the ITSM use case, there are other accelerators that uses interactive forms. So when the user has to input some data and that goes to the apps or any other forms, they are also thinking about adding the forms AI, which is being recently added to a couple of accelerators. And most of these accelerators act as the best practices, just like our RE framework, having an attended framework, or even the orchestrator manager by itself. It's like an accelerator. It's its own utility tool, but but it has its own benefits on you will use it across the board, not just with one specific solution. So the same way, these solution accelerators are not just down to one specific domain. So, and these are being vetted out by UiPath, and they talk to all the partners, and they are still trying to come up with how many different areas or different grounds, the platforms that they want to cover, so that they don't miss out any specific domain, be it healthcare, HR, or finance for that matter. Andy, over to you.
I was thinking on a much more fundamental level. One of the things that Pradeep showcased is the marketplace, right? And if you are not familiar with marketplace, right, on how to make your way around it, I mean, it's great that UiPath has put in an accelerators tab right up there next to the products at the top of the screen. But if you're not familiar with it, we have a complete series on this channel. And if you want to make yourself a little more familiar with marketplace, not just to look for solution accelerators, but also look for other things, you might find that useful, because it's not just about seeking the name of an accelerator or a component, but there are several aspects this page has to show you about what it is made up of, what's the description, what is the licensing. And sometimes by looking at the dependencies of the project, you can try to kind of figure out what it does. So a lot of detail in those series of videos, and if you want to kind of go through those, and so that you're better prepared to look at something like solution accelerators, I think that would be a great start for those who are not familiar with marketplace and or solution accelerators, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it makes you better prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point, Andy. So let's talk about a little bit more in detail about this particular accelerator. Besides this, there are, I think, 3 or 4 more accelerators that have been recently updated, and several more on UiPath DU models, some on AI Center. So there are, like we saw before, right? There are over 62 accelerators are out there, and they are getting updated as new features are available. So we'll come back and add uh, more use cases as we discuss later episodes, but let's focus on this one today. So let's see what we find over here, right? So once you log in here, you have to sign in and then download this particular accelerator here. So I have already downloaded it. So let me show you what you would get. So primarily what happens here, you would get an accelerator, a folder, a zip package, compressed file. When you unzip it, you would have these 3 directories over here. Let me maximize this. And the first and foremost thing, when you're coming here, always go to the documentation and open the documentation. I think I already have it opened here. Okay. So this is a user access management solution accelerator. So I'll go over a few things here. One of the most interesting thing that caught my eye at the get-go itself, the level of documentation. I really love that fact that it is very well documented, um, not just from an overview perspective, but it had dedicated sections for architecture, main features, what features this particular accelerator is going to cover. There are some general features. Down below, if you look at the technical assets, how can you, what is the data DS schema, queues, assets? So they talked about that. Then they go into individual templates that it's built out. And each of these templates go in detail explaining what that particular template does. Um, and last but not the least, at the end, it will actually walk you through a series of steps how to deploy this particular accelerator. Okay. And then later on, there are some known issues, observation limitations for that matter. And like UiPath mentioned on their page itself, right? This is not a plug and play solution. So this is a template, if you will. It's a modeled solution for you to use and build your own use case. So that's the primary objective is for me, this is, I would not say that this is theoretical, but it is more prescriptive solution design, right? So if you really want to learn how to build your solution inside out, uh, I would recommend spending some time reviewing these documentation and also the solution that comes with it, because that will clear out a lot of things, not just how UiPath solution is built, but in general how you should uh, approach a solution design or solution architecture, right, at a very foundational level.
Very well said, Pradeep.
Yeah.
I think like from a solution architect perspective, this gives out like, the architecture and the design principles that goes behind like what was the thought process of how they came up with this solution and like why they came up with this. So like,
Yeah.
like explaining, not just giving like one line objective saying like this is what the solution does. Because like we all work with like several other technologies, and like there are these starter packs where like I mean like I think like
Mhm.
initially when we built like couple of reusable components, I'm guilty of that too. When I uploaded one
Yeah.
of my components, the original objective that I would give is like just describe what the process does, but I wouldn't like really go into detail into explaining how my solution was built unless it's required, because like in open
Right.
source like that's truly not required. But
Yeah.
here this very well detailed, going down to the level of explaining how many layers are there, what are the process steps, and for each of the variations, because like we are talking about multiple systems, right?
Yeah.
Like the Jira, ServiceNow, all these different systems, they have explained in detail like how each of them works. So that's actually a really good thing.
Yeah. Andy, you want to add something?
Yeah, I was looking at it from, I'm coming into this presuming that I do not know anything. I might be a solutions architect, and I might be relatively new to UiPath or the technology stack. And if you look at some of the documentation features of the solution accelerators, there's a lot of stuff hidden in there. I mean, looking at the queues, the data service schemas, and storage buckets and stuff like that, you can kind of get an idea of what you need to be prepared even before you start exploring the solution accelerator, right? And alluding to what Priya said, years ago, I built a framework for, I enhanced the RE framework considerably, and we had pieces of enhanced code that can do canned things, like, creating files or folders or sending email, etc. And I know how painful it was to document each part of that, and I documented each
Mm-hmm.
flow in something similar. So what must be appreciated is a lot of this stuff is given to you absolutely at no cost to you folks, at a tremendous amount of effort. I'm telling you this because I've done it. If you do not believe it, go over to the RPA Vanguard marketplace and take a look at the template, and then take a look at the documentation. It took me more time to document it than to actually develop it, right? So a lot of things to glean off of what you see. What do you need to get prepared even before you start looking through the solution accelerator? Be prepared for knowing more about queue processors, dispatchers, etc., queues, storage buckets, all of these things, so that you can make better use of what's been given to you, because a lot of the work has been done. And if you familiarize yourself with the basics of all the technology, aspects of the UiPath technology stack, it would make your experience that much more easier when you implement something using a solution accelerator.
I think the one of the basic things that everyone, a kind of a prerequisite that everyone has, should be aware of implementing RE framework solution, because
Right.
almost all of these accelerators are leveraging RE framework. So the
Right.
concepts will come again and again. So I would definitely not suggest this as like as a 101 example or hello world example kind of
Right. Right. Right.
solution. This is definitely for someone who has some experience with UiPath implementing RE framework
Correct.
solution. They would be able to really grab the concepts and would really appreciate what is out here.
Yeah.
And this can become a template for y- for your personal use, or wherever at work, if you want to leverage some of this template. I think that's really valuable asset here.
Yeah, a good point
Pradeep,
on the
yeah,
hello world, Pradeep. Sorry, Priya.
go ahead.
Because even if you're a lead engineer, lead architect, or solutions architect, this still isn't a hello world
Yeah.
application for a solutions architect, because the hello world is more of the RE framework, right?
Yes.
You know how to implement that, and then you get all that knowledge, and then this becomes that much easier.
Yeah, as Pradeep was talking, like, it came to me that, like, all the new COEs that are being formed, and they are looking for like a baseline to look at. I would say like these solution accelerators would be like a great place to, like, form your own guidelines as well.
Yep.
Because like looking at their own documentation, these are like, basic, like, our SDLC kind of
Yeah.
principles that we look at, like modularity, or like, they are talking about levels of abstraction. So these are things that as you form your COE and you want to have your own guardrails for your company, this is a great place to start.
Right.
All right, so let's jump in and talk more about some of the other documentation. So they have already specifically laid out a high-level solution design, which talks about you have ServiceNow. How do you extract an ITSM ticket where the dispatcher process would capture these requests from ITSM application? And if an approval is required, it will follow next step of processes. If approval required, it goes through approval process. There is a separate automation that will perform this. If there are no approval required, then it will go to a performer process, which will take that data, update that information in SAP, Active Directory, and other custom systems. Uh, Remember that this particular use case is about user provisioning. So the example that I talked about before, right? A new employee joins the organization, the hiring manager creates a ServiceNow ticket, and from there on, this workflow follows this step uh, based on approval required. If not, then it creates an Active Directory account. It creates that information in SAP. This is where your laptop, all the hardware devices will be dispatched to you. Any other system, customized system that organization is using, or any other user provisioning that are required, that will conduct it here. So it's a very wholesome process, right? And it's a process that all of us have gone through some or the other time.
I imagine myself taking this screen, this particular view, putting it on my second screen, and then as I implement the solution accelerator, just keep looking at where I am on this map, right?
Yeah.
What am I doing? Because there are so many of these components and so many of these levels that you're going down. At least, you should know where you are on this map. I think this is pretty useful when you start from the top down and start going about implementing, each component, each part of it, and still get bearings on where you are in the implementation process.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me go through a few other things. So within the documentation section, in the related documents, you'll find detailed solution design diagram, high-level solution design. We just looked at it. RE framework documentation. This is the same RE framework documentation that's part of the RE framework template. And then you have a reusable component methodology. And I would spend a whole separate session on this particular documentation, because this talks about standardizing how you build your modular design, right? Even referencing concepts from microservices architecture. So feel free to browse through this documentation, but there's a lot of content, but at the same time, it's a very quality content that you can really take advantage of it. All right, so
That
let's move on.
that's a great point, Pradeep. I mean, reusable thing. I must look at it now. I must
Yeah,
look at it now that I've seen it. I have to go through it, because that's
sure.
something that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. So as part of this accelerator, other than documentation, there are four other folders: application, interaction, reusables. So let's look at this. So what this provides, again, going back to the premise that this is a solution accelerator, it will provide you nuggets or small piece of code that can help you build your automation. All right. So it provides you a code to establish connectivity with your Active Directory. Now, you don't have to build it from scratch. It's already here, right? It already provides you a proper structure where it has all these workflows already, where you can create AD user, how the user is added to a group. And if you want to delete it or remove it, you have the operations as well. So you can perform administration of a user. So in a way, user's life cycle in an organization or in an account, you can manage through this solution. And I'm not going
Pradeep,
to, yes.
given Active Directory, right? I mean, it's a very crucial part of IT security, right? Do you envision any of the solutions architects like sitting together with the security folks? I'm asking purely based on my
Mhm.
background, where security is very involved in everything. Do you think that they need to kind of run it through security first and show them what exactly the solution accelerator does, given how much UiPath can do? I mean, basically, if how much of control it can have over a process such as IT onboarding or ITSM in general. You think that might be something that users must kind of take into consideration, given the seriousness of what this does?
Right. So there are two aspects to it, right? One, as an end user, how you integrate Active Directory. And the second aspect is what roles and permissions are given to a user, right?
Right,
So defining the RACI chart, right? That's primarily coming from the IT administrator of the AD
right.
itself, right? So they will define what roles and privileges that particular user needs to get based on their role in the organization. uh, how you implement it, even administrators use scripting, because not these things are not done manually, right?
Manually.
Until
Right.
unless it's only just one-off case. Most of these cases are already have built-in automation. So Based on my experience, UiPath has already, in some of the places, they have implemented UiPath for IT support work, right? And if you look at some other accelerators that we plan to talk about in later episodes, where your service desk automation will actually take care of these things, right? So
Right.
automation would trigger these actions. However, as far as the security is concerned, that will always be monitored by the IT team. They will always follow the security policies of their organization, right? So that part will always stay or closely guarded. Um, but as far as user provisioning is concerned, that user provisioning and user management is concerned, those things will continue to be automated.
Right.
One
Right.
basic point that I just want to point out is that even though that these reusable components are available, like even though when we open these XAMLs in Studio, we will only have the skeleton of it. Like you would still have
Right.
to configure. So that's where
Exactly.
like your roles and access comes into play. So like
Right.
for anybody who's like trying to just experiment because like you might not be an admin in your company, you might not be able to do it because like you won't have the access. And that
Right.
goes the same for any HRIS, CRM
Right.
system.
Right.
So
Yeah,
just like try it out, but still use it only with the, like a test system first.
Yeah.
And
sure.
going back to the principles, start with your dev environment
Yeah.
anywhere that you use this.
Sure. The policies here can only be used like other projects. If you look at, right, ServiceNow example, or SAP or Jira for that matter, right? So this is all a building block code, right? How you can build that connection. But obviously you have to provide the URL for ServiceNow account or Jira account. You have to provide the authentication mode, whether are you going to use a auth authentication, or you're going to use a username password based authentication. All those inputs are required,
Mhm.
rightly pointed out by Priya here. All right, so we talked about application interaction reusables here. Let's go down here on the user management reusables. The user management is, so we already looked at how we can integrate with IT solutions or IT platforms for that matter. But now when you have a solution in place, there are other things, other activities that you have to perform, like sending emails, right? For that matter, in your automation, you would require a send email component. So rather than you have to build it for yourself, or you can just leverage this. So that's the beauty. Like these are the general administration activities that you have to perform, file operations. So you may have to copy file from one location to another location, or you have to move file through FTP for that matter, right? So you can use file operations. There are a few other components here, like for queues. So you can use this particular use automation for adding user access to a queue. This is where the solution will come, which will process these by the processor template. So let's go. I think that will make more sense when we look at these processes here. All right, so let's talk about the processes that are part of this accelerator itself. So there are four processes we talked about, right? So if you're feeling like lost, right? So let's go back and revisit this diagram and maybe put it like this. All right, so this may, because that's the beauty of solution, right? When you're walking through a solution and if we feel like you're lost, we need to always level set. All right. I think this may give you a better view of it. So we talked about four processes here, right? So dispatcher process, approval process, performer process, and finalizer, right? So which will wrap up action. The same way we have four process templates are available here. We have a dispatcher which actually extracts requests from ITSM application and it will put in a queue. So if you have done RE framework, implemented that, right, you can very well relate to dispatcher performer architecture. So it's just leveraging on that itself. So this is my dispatcher template, very much standard RE framework architecture, you have a framework folder where you have different processes here, a main file that will download files from ServiceNow. And remember, in that application integration process, there is a automation code that you can use to connect to ServiceNow, right? So you can plug in that code from there. All right. So once we go through dispatcher, then we go to the approval process if there is any approval required. So approval is within the same platform. So let's say for this matter, right? You can build it in many ways, right? Within UiPath ecosystem, you can actually create an action center request and assign that as an action center to the approving manager. Or you can perform this within ServiceNow also. You can use the ServiceNow workflow item and you can route it that way. So there are multiple ways to do it.
Pradeep, just to state the obvious, right? In case anyone's doing this for the first time, that blue box that you said, the dispatcher process, is a project in itself, and that has to be deployed as a process individually, right? Once you build it, get it tested, and then you deploy it, right? Okay.
Right. So that's where I think we talked about before, right? You have to have a familiarity with building solutions in RE framework. So you know the basic ins and outs of how the solution works. And this is kind of a scaled model or maybe an advanced use case for implementing the same.
Right.
So we talked about approval. After approval, you have a performer template that is again another component of RE framework itself. What it does, it actually picks up, reads queue items from your orchestrator queue, and it will perform various steps. And those steps could be updating another application where you are creating a purchase order for that matter, creating a user account in Active Directory, or any other applications. Let's say for that organization, they have to create your user account in Jira, your user account with HR systems, with payroll systems. There are many different use cases, sub components will come over here, but you get the idea. All right, once everything is wrapped up, then there's the last template here, which is primarily sending out confirmation emails to yourself, to your hiring manager that this particular user has been onboarded and is now has access to all the applications. And obviously that will trigger some other emails notifications, which will include your username, password, how you create your user account, and all that stuff. All right. So that gives a end-to-end overview for each of these steps and how these are mapped to each of these solutions over here. Now, there are bits and pieces that would come in here for which you will go back and pick those application integration reusable components from here, whether you're integrating with ServiceNow, SAP, Active Directory, or any other application for that matter. That's where these components come in picture that you can plug in. And for administrative purposes, these are the other objects that you can use, where you can use these automation process files, whether it's adding users to queue, reading the queue, recording that information, or sending out email or performing file operations for that matter.
And for folks that are like thinking about like the release management or like in terms of the deployment itself, as Pradeep was showing the initial documentation, the first document where it goes through the user provisioning, there's a section there where they talk about like what are the aspects, the technical aspects that are involved within the UiPath platform. So like what he was showing with the queues, the action centers, or like, you know, the data services, all of them, like how to deploy them. Here he shows like the steps on like how to deploy. So this section clearly talks about step by step, like how you can migrate from one environment to another. So if you're playing the role of a release manager or like, you know, the change advisory board, like you need to look at like certain aspects and like approve like how these need to go through. You can take a look at this deployment steps. And also there's a folder called deployment where it gives you like the schema and like the assets and what format it needs to be, and like what are the assets that will be involved. So like all of that, it's again like optional, because like depending on like which system that you're going to use, you need to use those specific assets and queues.
Right. Go ahead, Andy.
Pradeep, if you go back to the line diagram, the whole flow chart kind of a thing in the PDF, right? Um, I'm just trying to, go off of or tee off of the boots on the ground kind of experience, because normally, in an ideal situation, by the time you get to the implementation of this solution accelerator template, the solution architect will probably would have all the access and all the kind of inputs that he would require so that he can hand it off to his team to implement. But in the real world, that's not how things work, right? For example, if I have to get access to ServiceNow APIs, sometimes it takes several weeks to go through the whole process, especially if you are in very vertical companies like finance, banking, etc., or healthcare. In fact, so I'm really looking at this. I'm thinking, if I want to start in a real agile manner, right? If I want to, because you can't wait sequentially for something to happen, right? I would put in a request to get the ServiceNow API access, but then how do I keep things moving, right? So the challenge would be, if I take this up, would be, can I still implement these projects to run in kind of a shell mode? You know what I mean? Okay, I can connect to APIs right now, but can I bypass that somehow and say, I have access to queues. I have access to. I have the ability to build the performer, the dispatcher, etc. Can I mock up some structures of data and put them in the queue, right? And then that will not stop me from building my approval process, right? But when I'm building my approval process, does it require some more access that I really cannot do something, but I can mock it up? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is, in a practical real world situation where so many teams are involved, so many access levels are involved, permissions are involved, whether it's possible to do that, right? Keep the solution accelerator implementation running while at the same time you're waiting for access to be granted, or the things to come your way based on the official procedures. Because I've faced this many times, right? We are ready. Technically, there's nothing stopping us from doing something, but administratively, we are always hit with this. Yeah, you can access that API. No, you got to wait for 2 weeks before we give you that key. And we are like, okay, we have to open up the ports for you. That's going to take time. So technically, nothing is stopping us from implementing. But even then, when you look at a vast project like this, such as a solution accelerator, I was thinking if there's a way to keep these things moving, and that's something I would be very interested to explore. Right? Can I
Yeah.
can I
So
make this whole thing run in a shell? Right? Just not doing anything, but make sure that the concept works, and at least we are prepared.
right. So not to say there is a quick fix for it, because
Yeah.
some of the administrative policies differ from organization to organization, and those challenges would remain, right? They are out
Yep.
of our control. But at the same time, there are ways to find alternates, like let's say for ServiceNow, for example, right? Um, if you don't have access to your corporate ServiceNow account, maybe you can go and get a developer account
Yeah.
Yep.
and build your solution accelerator on that. If you don't have, and you can use that sample data to prove the point that solution accelerator, how it
Yep.
works. The same goes with SAP and AD. You can rather than using AD, you can use if you have access to Azure, you can use Azure AD account
Right. Right.
for test.
Right.
So there are alternates available. The only thing is how far or how long we have to wait that you want to still proceed and build a running application
Yeah.
to prove
Yeah.
the value of a solution. And
Yeah.
then later on, it would be a more or less a matter of changing the configuration,
Correct. I mean,
right?
most often, if we wait too long, especially in projects of this scale, we end up, the whole development team ends up going, backed up against the wall, because now they have to
Exactly.
deliver everything quickly. And a project of this magnitude, things can slip through the cracks, and you can have serious downstream problems.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good point. Like you said, are there options that I can use to
Yeah,
still keep this
if
thing
you,
moving?
yeah, most of the cases, see, as long as you're dealing with platform applications, you can always have a trial account or a
Right.
developer account available to you. The only restriction is primarily is data, because
Yeah.
data is always specific. So you would have to wait for
Yeah.
access to the data that you really need to,
Right. Right.
but you can still create a mock-up application that performs
Right.
as you
Uh,
plan to.
yeah. I mean,
And
that's a
Andy,
good
to
point.
add to your
Yeah.
Andy,
Go
to
ahead.
add to your thought process, I would
Uh,
say like these are solution accelerators that are meant to speed up the whole process. But if you have like, administrative touchdowns which act like speed breakers, then there's nothing that's gonna like, speeden up the process.
I mean, that's why I brought this up, because, like Pradeep said, you might be able to go get, for ServiceNow, for example, you might be able to go get a developer account, right? Uh, but for there are some closed door system, completely closed systems, where not getting just the API access or just getting a user account is not enough. They even curtail you from using certain data points. They give you a certain set. I'm facing that in one of the
Yeah,
projects I'm working on right now. You have to use certain accounts, even if you're in development. You have to use certain accounts. You have to use certain data points. You cannot use anything that you think you should use. So I think all of those things are kind of, something to think about, even before, going towards solution
but
accelerators.
those constraints will always be there, Andy, right?
Yeah.
Just for an example, right? So let's say if you want to build something, uh, some automation on Workday, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have an enterprise account, there is no free account for Workday.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Tell me
but
about it.
that yeah, but that doesn't stop you from building a use case on let's say HR management solution, right?
Right.
You can use some other platform and
Right.
still prove your point. But
Right.
I think uh, administrative hurdles will always be there,
Yeah.
and there is no way out of it. The only
Yeah.
thing is, it's more about how much it's more about executive support,
Yep.
right? In an organization, how much support you have, that it all boils down to that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
whether the whole organization is behind it, or at least a business unit is behind it to
Yeah.
get it done, then it will get done,
Yeah.
right?
True. Yeah.
And
All
again,
right.
like with this whole, the solution accelerator, like even with this process, we are talking about the whole user provisioning, which might include like, the Active Directory, like your email account, like so many other things. But like again, pick and choose like what is it that your business really wants, because like your business might need like only like a certain aspect, and if they are like very restrictive, again, like your process might vary, your solution design diagram might look slightly different than this one. So this is
Yeah.
like a nice area where you can like customize it. So we can pick what we want and we can add what we want.
Absolutely. Because your some organizations may need like two levels of approval, right? Just a
Right.
simple example.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is just a kind of a block diagram, right? Just you
Yeah.
take it, you add to it, remove it, what you don't need it, and then you just run with it. So
Right.
before, I think we have gone through, but before we wrap up for today's discussion, Priya was talking about the implementation part. That's a very good point here. So let's quickly go over it. I'm not going to do the whole deployment here, but we'll talk about some of the things that you need to be careful while you're performing the deployment. So besides RE framework, you need to know a little bit about data service as well, because it uses data schema where the data is hosted, right? So, but the schema file is already here. If you look at the deployment folder here, there are three files, the schema, and there are queue and assets. So queue is primarily all the different queues that we talked about in our high-level solution design, where the dispatcher is creating these queues. It lists the name of those queues. Assets are actually the credentials, whether it's an access credential for ServiceNow, SAP, AD, and all that, right? So those are the assets that you have here. And schema is for the data service. So you just follow through this example. This is very well laid out. And the best part is this is latest. This
Right.
accelerator is updated as of September 1st, 2023. So everything, all the screenshots for that matter are up to the point, right? I've gone through the steps. It doesn't take much time, just 15-20 minutes and everything is up and running as long as you have other account credentials with you. One of the things that's very interesting, if you have never used Orchestrator Manager component, that's another component from Marketplace. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed. To be honest, sometimes what happens, right? Even if you are seasoned professional, when you see, okay, this is a whole big document, I have to go through hundreds of steps. Don't get overwhelmed with that. Go through the steps. You will end up with a very handy solution out there. Okay. Uh, Purpose of using orchestrator component is actually consuming queues and assets because that particular component will help you perform or add these very quickly in the orchestrator. Otherwise, you can do this manually as well. You can just go through, read through what queues need to create, what assets need to be provisioned. You can do that manually as well if you do not want to use the orchestrator component. So that's the kind of a hidden marketplace component that you have to use that's not mentioned anywhere
No, I
before.
agree. I don't know. I didn't know about this. This is news.
Yeah, yeah,
I must confess because I always thought that, an admin would have to go in and create, the queues and assets and things like that in the orchestrator before we can. But this is good to know. This is really
yeah.
good.
For a large enterprise, this is really a handy component when you have to create several queues, and this helps you with your migration process. If you are upgrading or you're migrating from on-prem to cloud or vice versa, in all those cases, it's very helpful.
Right.
Once those components are created, it talks about, goes through how you create assets, how you perform your queues. Once they are set up with the orchestrator manager, you have the screenshots, how to perform those steps. Then you create your task catalog. User provisioning is a folder that is created under, besides other folder. We want to keep all the automation processes, everything under this particular folder. So there is a folder segmentation, which is a logical separation of view and data. So you can go with that. After that, you set up the libraries. And once you have done that, then you have to provide the entities. You have to go through some additional steps to manage those entities. And yeah, after that, you just pick up which particular project you want to set up. So let's say you want to set up your dispatcher. You have to pick up which particular component you want to use, whether you want to use ServiceNow, Jira, or whichever. There are 4 of them they have listed out. So you pick which one you want to use, repair the dependencies, and then you provide the credentials. For ServiceNow, you will provide the URL, port, and your account credentials or auth key. Either way, whichever way you want to connect to them. So yeah, that will help you set up the whole application step by step. Because again, going back to the first point itself, right? This is not a plug and play solution. We have to build our own solution. We have
Right.
all the Lego blocks available to us. Now it's up to us whether we make a Falcon 9 or
Yeah.
we make uh,
The Millennium Falcon,
exactly.
to quote Star Wars. Uh,
Exactly. So you
yeah, but
choose whether you want to build a SpaceX Falcon 9 or a
yeah.
Millennium.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd like to note, what I observed is when Pradeep showcased the deployment folder. Remember, I think it's a modern folder, right?
Yes.
So if I still hear that people are using legacy, the classic folders and stuff.
Mhm.
So if you are planning to move and implement solution accelerators, please do keep that in mind. You will have to upgrade yourself to a modern folder, and you can see from the documentation that's indeed a modern folder. So please do be aware of that. The whole experience is going to be much more modern and much more latest.
Absolutely. and there are some of the known issues and observations are all listed out here. Um, so all in all, it's a really great documentation, to be honest. Like I said before, also, I'm really impressed with the level of information over here. Uh, and uh, they have not cut short any information, right? So
Right.
you have appropriate information for each component, each piece, whether it's a deployment or the solution walkthrough itself. So that really makes it uh, a very good read in a way. If you just sit down, go through this document, it's pretty simple. It's not all actionable insights in the documentation. So each and everything that's listed out here, those are action items that you have to perform from design to deployment.
Right. I think it would be a great, I envision if we were a team of guys, developing something or implementing a solutions accelerator. I feel that this would be a great thing to sit down with your team of developers and then go through the whole thing and then say, okay,
Yeah,
one of them takes responsibility of this, the other takes responsibility of this, and then automatically what might happen is the effort to completely download the entire documentation into one person's brain would be reduced, right? It would be divide and conquer. And I think that would be a good starting point if somebody doesn't want to get overwhelmed with the amount of documentation. So you can part the project at the beginning, hand it off to individual players and say, hey, why don't you go take a look at this and tell me as practically, what do you think about this? And then a lot of that knowledge then can be brought together and during the build process. And I think that would be a great way if you're looking to not get overwhelmed by the documentation process.
yeah, I think it was really good going through this. I'm really excited to see more of these and some of the use cases that I might be interested personally.
Right.
This is really going to be if this level of documentation, I have seen a few more, but they have the same level of documentation for all of them. So that's really good for even for new practitioners and as well for the seasoned practitioners. This is going to not just help them go through the solution design process, but also be able to leverage a lot of it for practical usage, right? So and for anyone who is new, for them this is a gold mine, to be honest.
Yeah. Um, I must honestly say, I mean, I tried to get to this. I was not able to give it the attention. And I'm glad that Pradeep, I was able to make it here as a newbie, right? Totally getting exposure to this, the insights of Solution Accelerator. I mean, I knew in principle what it is, but then the amount of detail that you just now laid
Yeah.
out, and it has piqued my curiosity. And I must really get back to, especially the uh, component reusability and the orchestrator component that has now made me curious. I think this was a great overview, Pradeep. I think anyone who watches this will find this a great starting point for ramping up their efforts with solution accelerators.
Yeah, absolutely. I expect folks would take advantage of this. I had a lot of fun going through this, um, and I'm looking forward for more. Like I mentioned, there are a few more use cases that have been recently updated, and
Right.
there are a ton of DU models have been updated as part of the accelerator program. And if I have the correct information in, I think, next 6 weeks or so, there will be a lot more coming up. So
Yeah.
Nice.
And
um,
also for folks starting with AI, like these are like a great place to start because there are a couple of AI accelerators like the passport, the vehicle titles, like very basic out of the box models, and you don't know like how to set up the DU framework. I think like this is a great place to start.
Yeah.
absolutely. So we'll talk about more about those as well in coming weeks. Uh, like we mentioned, we are not going to go through each of them, but mainly focus on uh, the categorized by products and services that make sense and that really fun to go through, and at the same time, it will be fun for everyone to watch. So
Absolutely.
I think that being said, thank you everyone for your time, and I hope we all see you again in our next episode.
And don't
Yep.
forget to subscribe to our channel and
Yep.
comment like what did you like the most and what would you like to see in the future Accelerator series.
Right.
A
This
Falcon
is
9 or a Millennium Falcon.
yeah. But thank you, folks. Thank you very much. And please do like and subscribe. And if you found this useful, please do share this information with other members of the community. And Pradeep, once again, thanks very much, because this is the first time I'm stepping into this series as a newbie, and you've given me a great overview and kind of given me a couple of things to get motivated and pursue. And again, in the spirit of this subject, should we all run into something that we think we should share with the community, we'll be back with a few more mini series of solution accelerators where we think
Absolutely.
we have something to share. So stay tuned.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yep. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye now.